While we look to the future, we may all feel a bit down and despondent about it. But what impact will AI have on that joy? Well, the man to speak to about this is the wonderful Mal Fletcher, futurologist and social commentator. AI and jobs. I was a bit despondent when I saw the list of the 40 most likely jobs that are going to be taken away by AI, because journalism is on that list. Editors and journalists, public relations specialists also were listed as jobs with tasks AI can perform effectively.
Yeah, I mean, it's a long list, isn't it? But it's basically probabilities, and we have to remember that there's nothing definitive about that. It's just probability based on what AI can do. But there are other factors we have to consider in AI in the jobs market. And one of them is public acceptance of the AI. Maybe the public doesn't accept a particular use of AI for a certain service. And so the organization or company has to change its approach a bit. There's no doubt that AI is going to affect jobs. I mean, I was reading just recently about China's new fully AI-operated virtual hospital built to service 10,000 patients a week in the virtual space. So you're not getting surgeries, but you're getting, consultations, diagnosis, and some level of treatment. So that's just one example of where AI could really have a big impact on jobs in a certain field. But as I say, there are certain types of jobs that won't be vulnerable to full takeover, either because the public doesn't like it or because they just involve skills that AI doesn't have. So, for example, work that requires highly creative or nuanced content. AI tends to spit out very generic content that lacks originality. There are jobs that involve complex decision-making and human judgment. So work that involves strategic leadership or crisis management or ethical decision-making. AI just doesn't have the emotional intelligence for that.
I would have thought that journalism would have fallen into that, because there is all of those things. You have to have, when I was doing some really very difficult work, you had to think ethically about, should I put this person's face on screen? Is that fair to them? Will they be in danger if I do it? If I interview this person, do I have to, interview them and put a fake voice on it? Do I have to? I remember one time spending hours taking the stutter out of a commander's voice, because he was one of the best military commanders I know, and I wanted him to have that respect from what he was saying. That's an ethical and critical thought. I don't know if AI would be capable of that.
Well, perhaps not. I certainly think that in any job that involves human information sharing or human contact, like journalism, we need to play up the empathic side more and more going forward, and stress the fact that we have real people talking to real people about the issues that affect real people. People really want to hear news, at least the big news, from other human beings who share their feelings about the news. And we shouldn't, as I say, assume that a line tracing AI's presence in the workspace will follow a steady upward path. Some companies even now are reining in their reliance on AI because they see its limitations. So AI, as I said, gives out generic content. Companies don't want that. They want originality. Companies are aware that AI hallucinates, producing inaccurate outputs at times. And that would undermine public trust in things like healthcare, for example. And organizations are concerned about AI bias and its tendency to sometimes bypass important regulations. And if you're in healthcare or finance, for example, you don't want to face the lawsuits that might result from that. So there are lots of ways in which the AI incursion into the jobs market is not as clear-cut as things like this table from Microsoft seem to represent.
I mean, it is good news, though, for those, at the moment, those physical jobs, isn't it? It is good news for people who are plumbers or plasterers or, all of those jobs that we relied on completely during COVID. Those important jobs. So, you know, I don't know about bricklaying. They've probably got a machine that can do that. But certainly, there's even massage therapists is on the list here as something that couldn't be done by an AI or a robot.
Well, it can't be done by AI-driven robots as they presently stand.
Yeah.
We have to be open-minded enough to say that there could come a time when robots can do just that. I mean, I remember, you will, when Sony couldn't get a robot to walk.
Yeah.
And that was only like 15 years ago. And now they can do somersaults and all sorts of things. So I think we have to have an open mind a bit on that. But I'm also concerned in all this talk about AI in the jobs market, about the growing concentration of power in the hands of the biggest AI developers. The usual suspects, you know, Google, Meta, Apple, people like that. They've all set out these big plans for the next phase of AI, and that will open up some exciting possibilities, but it could also do some damage. It could undermine democracy. It could give big tech more influence in society than the governments have. Look at the power Elon Musk had recently on the balance of the Ukraine-Russia situation because of his Starlight.
Well, exactly, and already it appears that he's got way too much power in one person's hands, and you know, we've seen how that gets messed up with politics on some occasions, and you know, that is frightening, and I know that across Europe they're looking at monopolies now in the technological field and trying to figure out how they break those down so that one person doesn't dictate if you can take a mobile phone anywhere, call it anywhere in the world, right? But what's worrying though is in America, Trump has just signed his big bill. I refuse to call it beautiful. His big bill, saying that there will be absolutely no oversight on AI for the next 10 years.
Yeah, that is a bit frightening, and I hope that wiser heads prevail in the end in American Congress and other houses of government. But I think the political threat from AI is going to grow the more we rely on AI for things that governments provided before. So areas like healthcare, we've got our health minister saying now that we could have, you know, a doctor in the pocket because of AI. But a recent report here in the UK showed that when women access AI health services, they're advised to see a doctor much less often than men. So there's bias in there that needs to be dealt with. And I think AI developers can also destabilize economies by pressuring governments into things like fully cashless economies that rely entirely on data, which of course they control. And they could also force new labour policies that suit their particular interests. So we need to keep a careful eye, not just on the AI, but on the powers behind the throne, as it were.
Well, and also those powers change. That is something we can't control.
Yeah, well,
you might have a benign owner one year and a one that means harm the next.
Yeah, which is why we need very clear regulations based in sound ethics. But we also, as individuals, need to be careful how much we rely on AI. If we're not careful, if we're not watchful, we'll sleepwalk into a situation where we allow AI to replace human thinking rather than augment it. We need to restrict our reliance on AI in the way that many of us now limit our time on social media. You know, we can't afford to see AI as our cognitive superior or on every level. It needs to be our partner or our servant. And we need regulation to back that up. And we need to educate ourselves on how to discipline our use of AI.
The trouble is that young people are being groomed, aren't they? Into this technology, like with phones. I mean, you and I are lucky we had a childhood without that oversight, right? We had a childhood without that that constant nagging from a computer in your pocket, and these kids are just not. They're just inure to it all.
Yeah, and you know, I've advocated for a while that we need people of all ages to be better educated on how data is collected, analysed and used. So data literacy training should be part of every school curriculum, all the way through to university into the workplace. It would help us going too far down the rabbit hole of advanced technologies without thinking critically or strategically about where they're going to lead us.
And just finally, I know this is a bigger conversation than we've got time for, but to use AI in the justice system, again, it feels to me like the justice system should be human-led. Because of nuances, because of different, it's not black and white. Is that something we should be concerned about?
Yes, it is, absolutely. It's a great area to demonstrate what we call keeping humans in the loop. We might use AI, especially large language models, to do things like help with research and looking at, precedent and all of those things that the law looks for. But we can't rely on it in the human interface. People need to feel that a human being is sitting in judgment on them, someone who understands human flaws and someone who understands mitigating circumstances and takes them into account. You can't do that necessarily with a machine. Humans can do things that machines can't. We just need to keep that in mind and make sure that governments keep that in mind.
The trouble is, if it's cheaper, we know which way they're going to go. It's all about follow the money. Mal, it's always such a pleasure to talk to you, although I do have nightmares after it, but thank you so much.
I'm sorry about that.
Thank you for joining me. Mal Fletcher, the futurologist and social commentator.